Joe Rogan has spent over 2,000 episodes talking to everyone: UFC fighters, scientists, comedians, conspiracy theorists, billionaires, and presidential candidates. He's built the biggest podcast in the world on one simple principle: genuine curiosity delivered without filters. So when Meghan Markle walked into his Austin studio expecting the usual sympathetic platform, she made a critical miscalculation. She saw a podcast host and assumed that meant pushover. She saw his casual demeanor and mistook it for lack of preparation. She saw his open curiosity and thought it meant she could control the conversation. Within 90 minutes, though she wouldn't last that long, the Duchess of Sussex would discover what countless politicians and celebrities had learned before her. Joe Rogan doesn't care about your title. He cares about whether your story makes sense. And when it doesn't, he says so. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure you hit subscribe and smash that like button. Now let's get into what really happened in that Austin studio. The Joe Rogan Experience studio had its usual casual energy: leather chairs, podcast equipment, the infamous elk meat in the fridge somewhere nearby. Joe sat in his signature position, headphones on, coffee within reach, ready for what his team had promised would be an interesting conversation. Meghan Markle entered with an entourage that seemed excessive for a podcast: handlers, a publicist, someone who appeared to be a narrative consultant. Meghan settled into her chair, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "We're good." "Cool. So, before we start, my show is pretty simple. We just talk. No topics are off limits unless you tell me up front. It goes long. We follow the conversation wherever it goes. That work for you?" Meghan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Within reason." "Within reason," Joe repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means there are some subjects I'd prefer to avoid." "Like what?" "Personal family matters, speculation about my marriage, things that have been addressed elsewhere." Joe nodded slowly. "Okay, but here's the thing. I don't really do restrictions. If something comes up naturally, I'm going to ask about it. You can choose not to answer, but I can't promise to avoid topics." Meghan's expression cooled. "That seems like a hostile way to start." "It's not hostile, it's honest. There's a difference. Most people appreciate knowing the rules up front. Most people aren't dealing with what I'm dealing with." Joe raised an eyebrow. "What are you dealing with?" "Constant misrepresentation, media attacks, people who've decided who I am without knowing me." "Okay, so help me know you. That's why you're here, right?" Meghan paused, seeming to realize she'd started off on the wrong foot. "Yes, that's why I'm here." "Great, let's go." Joe leaned back, his posture relaxed but his attention focused. "So, how's life? Like, actually, not the PR version, the real version." Meghan tilted her head, her expression shifting to something almost condescending. "I'm wonderful. Thriving, actually, though I find that question interesting, the real version. As if you expect me to say something other than the truth." "I expect nothing. I'm just curious. You've been through a lot publicly. I'm wondering how you're actually doing privately." "I'm doing great. America has been incredibly welcoming." "Has it?" "Because the media coverage hasn't been particularly welcoming. The Spotify thing ended badly. Netflix projects got canceled. You weren't invited to the Met Gala this year. That doesn't sound like a warm embrace." Meghan's expression hardened. "You're conflating media coverage with actual experience. My daily life is wonderful. What the press says is irrelevant." "Is it? Because you've done a lot of media yourself. Netflix documentaries, Oprah interviews, magazine covers. If media is irrelevant, why engage with it so much?" "To tell my own story. There's a difference between being covered by media and controlling your own narrative." "But the narrative hasn't been great lately, has it? The projects aren't materializing. The public perception seems to be shifting. What's going wrong?" Meghan's voice took on an edge. Nothing is going wrong. Projects evolve. That's the entertainment industry. Evolve is a nice word for canceled. The animated series was canceled. Several documentary concepts were dropped. That's not evolution. That's rejection. You don't understand how the industry works. I've been in entertainment for 30 years. I understand exactly how it works. When projects get canceled, it usually means someone isn't happy with something. Meghan shifted in her chair, her composure showing the first cracks. Can we talk about something else? Sure. Let's talk about the Met Gala. You weren't invited this year. What happened? Meghan's expression flickered, a flash of something that might have been hurt before she composed herself. I wasn't on the list this year. These things fluctuate. Do they? Because the Met Gala is pretty consistent about inviting major celebrities. You're a duchess. You're on magazine covers. Not being invited seems like a statement. I don't speculate about Anna Wintour's decisions. But you speculate extensively about the royal family's decisions. Why is Anna Wintour different? That's not a fair comparison. Why not? You've built your public narrative around analyzing what institutions do and why. The fashion industry is an institution. Why is examining your exclusion from their biggest event off limits? Meghan's face reddened. Because it's not relevant to anything important. It's relevant to your public standing. It's relevant to whether Hollywood has embraced you the way you expected. Those seem important. Hollywood has embraced me. Has it? You moved to California to build a media empire. The media empire isn't materializing. You're not being invited to major events. At what point do we acknowledge that maybe the plan isn't working? Meghan's voice rose. The plan is working fine. I don't measure success by party invitations. Joe nodded slowly. That's fair. How do you measure success? By impact. By the work we're doing through the foundation. By the conversations we're starting. What conversations? Specifically, what has changed because of your foundation work? Meghan paused, seemingly caught without a prepared answer. We're addressing systemic issues. Which ones? Name one issue you've addressed. Not raised awareness about, actually addressed. That's an unfair standard. It's literally the standard for measuring success. You said you measure by impact. What's the impact? Show me the receipts. The tension in the room was building. Joe remained relaxed. He always remained relaxed. But his questions were becoming sharper. Let's talk about Harry. How's he doing? Meghan's entire demeanor shifted. Walls going up, expression closing off. I'd prefer not to discuss my husband. Joe's eyebrows rose. Why not? He's your partner in everything. The foundation, the media appearances, the whole Sussex brand. How can we discuss your life without discussing him? Because some things should remain private. Joe laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh. Private? Meghan, you did a 6-hour Netflix documentary about your relationship. You discussed intimate details on Oprah. Your husband wrote a book sharing private family conversations. Where exactly is the privacy? That was our choice to share. And this is my choice to ask. You can't make your marriage the center of your brand and then act surprised when people ask about it. We're not a brand. You literally have a production company. You've trademarked your names. You license your image. How is that not a brand? Meghan's jaw tightened. There are rumors I'd like to address, since you're bringing him up. Which rumors? The divorce rumors, the separation speculation. They're completely false. We're stronger than ever. Joe nodded. Okay, good. Though I notice you brought up divorce. I just asked how he was doing. Why did your mind go there? Meghan stiffened. Because that's what the tabloids are obsessing over. I'm not a tabloid. I'm a guy asking a straightforward question. You escalated to divorce denials immediately. That's interesting. It's not interesting. It's defensive. Because everywhere I go, people insinuate. I didn't insinuate anything. I asked how your husband is doing. You're the one who introduced divorce into the conversation. If anyone's raising questions about your marriage, it's you. The observation landed with devastating precision. Meghan's face went from red to pale. That's incredibly unfair. It's incredibly accurate. I asked a simple question. You heard something else. That says something about where your head is. Meghan stood up slightly, then sat back down, a false start that betrayed her agitation. You're deliberately provoking me. I'm asking you questions. If questions feel like provocation, that says something about your relationship with questions. My relationship with questions is fine. Is it? Because every question I've asked has been met with defensiveness. How are you? Defensive. How are your projects? Defensive. How's Harry? Extremely defensive. That's not a relaxed person having a conversation. That's someone bracing for attack. Because I'm constantly attacked. By who? I'm literally just talking to you. I haven't insulted you. I haven't accused you of anything. I've asked basic questions about your public life, which you've made public, and you've treated each one like I'm your enemy. Maybe because media figures usually are. I'm not your enemy. I don't know you. I have no agenda. I'm just curious about your life and your choices. That's the whole show. But you've been hostile since you walked in. Meghan's voice sharpened. I haven't been hostile. I've been cautious. Cautious looks like thoughtful pauses and careful answers. What you've been doing is defensive and dismissive. Those are different things. You don't understand what I've been through. Then help me understand. That's literally why you're here. But every time I ask a question, you treat it as an attack. At some point, you have to wonder if the problem is the questions or the person answering them. Joe took a sip of his coffee, his expression thoughtful. Let me ask you something. You've done a lot of interviews. Oprah, Netflix, various magazines. Why did you agree to come on my show? It's long form. It's unstructured. It's not known for being gentle. Meghan considered the question. I thought it would be an opportunity for a real conversation, away from the usual media frameworks. And how's that going so far? Not well, apparently. Why do you think that is? Meghan paused. Because you're not being fair. What's unfair? I've asked about your life, your projects, your husband, your place in Hollywood. Those are standard conversation topics. I ask everyone the same kinds of things. Your framing is hostile. My framing is curious. I ask questions and wait for answers. That's the whole show. 3 hours of conversation. No editing, no manipulation. Just talk. If that feels hostile, maybe examine why. Because the questions themselves are loaded. How are you? Is loaded. How's Harry? Is loaded. Tell me about your foundation work. Is loaded. Those are literally the friendliest questions possible. Meghan's composure cracked. It's the way you ask them. I ask them normally, conversationally, the way I'd ask anyone. You're the one who's been defensive since you sat down. Before I asked a single challenging question, you were already braced for attack. Because I know how these things go. You don't know how this goes. You've never done my show. You assumed you knew, and you came in with walls already up. That's not my fault. That's preparation for a fight that wasn't happening. Meghan grabbed her water, took a long sip, then set it down with more force than necessary. I think we should wrap this up. We've been talking for maybe 40 minutes. My show usually goes 3 hours. I don't think I can do 3 hours of this. Of what? Conversation? Questions? Of hostile questioning disguised as curiosity. Joe shook his head slowly. There's been nothing hostile here. I've been completely friendly. I've asked you about your life, given you every opportunity to explain your perspective, and you've treated the entire conversation as an attack. That's not my hostility. That's your projection. I'm not projecting anything. You've projected hostility onto every question I've asked. You've interpreted basic curiosity as attack. You've brought up divorce when I asked about your husband. You've defended yourself against accusations no one made. That's projection, and it's exhausting to witness. Meghan's voice rose. You're psychoanalyzing me. I'm observing you. There's a difference. And what I observe is someone who's so convinced the world is against her that she can't recognize when someone is just trying to have a conversation. You're not trying to have a conversation. You're trying to catch me. Catch you in what? What are you hiding that you're so afraid of being caught? The question hung in the air like a trap. Meghan seemed to realize she'd stepped into dangerous territory. I'm not hiding anything. Then why are you so defensive? Why can't you answer basic questions without treating them as attacks? Why does every interview become a confrontation? Because people like you make it a confrontation. I've made nothing. I've asked questions. You've created the confrontation with your responses. The temperature in this room is your creation, not mine. Meghan stood up fully, her composure finally breaking. I'm done. This was a mistake. Joe didn't stand. He just looked up at her with that infuriating calm. Probably, but not for the reasons you think. What's that supposed to mean? You came here expecting to control the conversation. When you couldn't control it, you decided to leave. That's a pattern, isn't it? It's not a pattern. You left the royal family when you couldn't control your role. You leave interviews when you can't control the questions. You're leaving right now because I'm not being sufficiently agreeable. That's a pattern. Meghan's voice rose to something close to a shout. I left the royal family because of systemic racism and institutional cruelty, and you're leaving my podcast because I asked how your projects were going? Are those really comparable? You're deliberately minimizing. I'm pointing out the contradiction. You frame every departure as escape from oppression. But sometimes you're just leaving because things aren't going your way. Those aren't the same thing. Meghan pointed at Joe, her hand trembling. You don't understand anything about my life. I understand what you've shown me. And what you've shown me, today and over the past few years, is someone who demands empathy without offering any, who wants understanding without being willing to be understood, who treats every question as an attack and every interviewer as an enemy. Because you are enemies. I'm a guy with a podcast. I have literally no power over you. I can't cancel your projects. I can't exclude you from parties. I can't affect your life in any meaningful way. All I can do is ask questions and let you answer them. If that makes me your enemy, your definition of enemy is so broad that everyone becomes one. Meghan grabbed her purse, her movements sharp with controlled fury. This interview is over. It never really started. You were defensive before I asked the first question. You've been performing victim since you sat down. That's not conversation, that's strategy. I'm not performing anything. You've performed everything. The measured outrage, the defensive posture, the carefully calibrated exits. You've done this exact routine in a dozen interviews. Walk in with walls up. Treat every question as attack. Leave dramatically when things don't go your way. It's a playbook at this point. I don't have a playbook. Everyone has a playbook. Yours is victimhood as defense. Whenever anything challenging comes up, you position yourself as the attacked party. It works on some people. It doesn't work on me. Meghan's face contorted with barely suppressed rage. You're going to regret this. Joe smiled slightly. Probably not. I've had thousands of conversations. Some go great, some don't. This one didn't. I'll move on. I won't forget this. Okay, I probably won't remember it by next week. I talked to a lot of people. The dismissal was almost worse than any direct attack. Meghan stood frozen, caught between her desire to leave and her inability to accept being so easily forgotten. You're pathetic. Maybe, but I'm also still sitting here, ready to continue the conversation if you want to actually have one. You're the one leaving. Meghan walked toward the exit, then turned back for one final statement. History will vindicate me. People will see what I've been through. Joe nodded thoughtfully. Maybe, or maybe they'll see someone who had extraordinary privilege and spent most of her time complaining about it, who had every platform available and used them all to perform victimhood, who had the chance for genuine conversation and chose confrontation instead. I didn't choose confrontation. You chose it before you walked in. The walls were already up. The defenses were already in place. I was just the latest person to bounce off them. I won't be the last. He paused. I hope you find peace, Meghan, I really do. But peace isn't something you find by treating everyone as your enemy. At some point, you have to let the walls down and trust that someone might actually want to understand you. I was willing. You weren't. Meghan stared at him for a long moment. Something flickered behind her eyes. Maybe recognition, maybe just more anger. It was impossible to tell. Goodbye, Joe. Goodbye, Meghan. Good luck. She turned and walked out. The door closed behind her with a decisive click. Joe sat alone in the studio for a moment, then turned to his microphone. Well, that was interesting. I don't usually have guests walk out. Actually, I can't remember the last time it happened. Usually, people stay for the conversation, even when it gets uncomfortable. That's kind of the point. Pushing through discomfort to find understanding. He shrugged. I'm not sure what she expected. I asked her about her life, her projects, her husband. Basic stuff. She treated every question like I was attacking her. And maybe, from her perspective, I was. When you've been through a lot of media criticism, maybe every question does feel like an attack. But at some point, you have to distinguish between actual attacks and genuine curiosity. I was genuinely curious. She couldn't see it. He leaned back. Here's what I think. I think she's built such strong walls that she can't tell the difference between enemies and people who just want to talk anymore. And that's sad. Because underneath all that defensiveness, there's probably an interesting person. A person who's been through real things, had real struggles, made real choices. But we couldn't get to that person. The performance got in the way. He took a sip of coffee. Anyway, she's welcome back anytime. Most people who walk out regret it eventually. Maybe she will too. The interview lasted 43 minutes before Meghan walked out. Its impact would last considerably longer. Joe Rogan continued doing what he'd always done, having long conversations with anyone willing to sit across from him, following curiosity wherever it led, and refusing to pretend that defensiveness was the same as honesty. Meghan Markle returned to Montecito, to her foundation work, to her ongoing media strategy. But the confrontation followed her, proof that her narrative couldn't withstand someone who simply kept asking questions. Some conversations reveal connection, others reveal walls, and some walls are so high that even genuine curiosity can't climb over them. Joe had been curious, Meghan had been defensive, and the microphones had captured it all. What do you think? Was Joe too direct? Or did Meghan deserve every question? Who would you want to see on JRE next? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video to help it reach more people. Subscribe to our channel for more explosive celebrity moments.